Hi everyone, I'm Professor Vinod and welcome to Career Bolt. Today's conversation is going to be about the major mistakes made by students in their early 20s as they begin their career and how best to avoid them. I'll try to cover around 10 to 11 common mistakes I've seen in detail. So, the first and biggest mistake which most students make when they get to their first job is that they chase salary and compensation. Salary and compensation is not wrong. It's a good market indicator of how good you are. So, a higher compensation does have some correlation to what skills you bring to the table. But unfortunately, a lot of students obsess over compensation, forgetting that skills are more important than compensation. So, when you develop your career, look at life in this manner. You always want your skills to be above and compensation to be below. So even if you're getting underpaid, if you're learning a lot, that's a fantastic job to be in. This means that if your compensation is as good as your skills, that's an optimal spot to be in. But unfortunately, it never really happens for most people. In a small segment of the population, the skills are lower and the compensation is much higher. And that's really a problem where the company is going to quickly find out that you're not really bringing value to the table because your skills are much lower and then your compensation is too high. So, what does it mean? It means that when the next layoff happens, your name is going to be in the list. So, within maybe 2 to 4 months, companies will find out if you are not adding value. And if that happens, you'll be out of a job. So, avoid being in a situation where you get very high compensation, but you're not learning much on your job. Avoid being in a position where you're getting paid very highly, but then you feel that after 2, 3 years, you're still doing the same thing. Those are clearly jobs to avoid. So talk to your friends, talk to your seniors, understand the culture of the company before you get in. This is going to be very important. Let's move on to point number 2, which is that most students forget about skills. They assume that compensation, the working culture is important, but they do not understand that what's really important is skills. What are you learning? So even if you're getting paid half the compensation of your friends, suppose your friends are getting a compensation of 10 lakhs, you're getting a compensation of 50% of it, like 5 lakhs, but you're learning more than your friends, you should go for it. So you're going to ask me, hey, why would that be the case? What I'm going to argue is that if your skills are very good after maybe 2, 3 years, maybe you're made much lesser than your friends in the first 2 to 3 years. But understand that when you begin your career, everybody's starting off at the lowest possible compensation. Compensation can only go up dramatically with time. So after, say, 10 years of work experience, you will make multiples of what you were making in your first year. So 1 year in your 30s, you'll probably make a lot more than all your money you saved up in your 30s on your 20s put together. Likewise, when you're working in your 40s, you'll probably make more than whatever you made in your 30s put together. So compensation goes up dramatically. It's not like a linear extrapolation. It goes up very high as you get a lot more experience. Your 40s, you can easily make, like in your good job in your 40s, you can make more than all your 20s and 30s put together. So use that framework in terms of trying to pick up a job where you will learn more in the long term. And the more you learn, the more specialized skill sets you gain, the more valuable you will be in the market. And compensation is only given, high compensation is only given for people whose market value is very high and the company is struggling to find great talent. So, for example, if you start off as a software engineer, you have to be the best possible software engineer out there. If you're just going to be an average software engineer, your career, your starting compensation can be very high, but then over time, it's going to be stagnant. And somebody who maybe started off as a production engineer at much lower compensation, after maybe 10 years, can make much higher compensation. So be aware of these details. Focus on where your interest is, where your skills are. Do strengths assessments, do skill finders, and there are a bunch of tools available on the internet. Try to use those tools and understand what are your skills, what are your strengths, and try to identify jobs based on skills and strengths, not based on compensation. The third piece where I feel that people make mistakes is about lack of clarity. There are many students who just have no idea what to do with their lives. So they feel that whichever company pays me well, I'm joined there. They just leave it to fate to decide where they want to go. Some people chase computer science careers because their friends are in computer science, because those jobs pay highly. It's based in Bangalore, which is a hip and happening city. But these are all wrong reasons to choose a career. You should only choose careers if you have interest in what you do. So even if you do not know what career to pursue, it's okay, because a lot of people, including me at a certain stage in my career, had no idea what is happening. So the best thing to do is at least identify those jobs where you're not good in. So even if you do not know which jobs will make a lot of sense for you, try to identify those jobs which do not fit you. Like early on in my life, I realized that I will not fit in coding, and coding is not for me. I'll not be a good fit for software careers. So I made a choice never to go in that space. Right or wrong, I think it worked out well in the long term. So I would also ask everyone to also ask yourself, what is it you don't want to do? Because you don't want to blunder into doing things which you're not capable in. For example, a lot of software companies, especially the lower tier software companies, are more than happy to give any job to students from the IITs or NITs, if only they apply to these places in software. And I think people join software even though they are not from the core engineering branches like mechanical, civil, biotech, uh, aerospace engineering, naval architecture, and so on. They just choose software engineering because they feel that that's a safe bet. Do not do safe bets in your life. Choose careers where you learn, where you have passion, where there's something to look forward to on a daily basis. Otherwise, life is going to be super boring, and your career will not just be stagnant, but will quickly deteriorate over time, because others are all working very hard to increase their skills. So you can't be in a position where your skills deteriorate over time. Okay. So fourth point is, students don't often understand the importance of internships and having work experience. So an internship basically means that you get introduced to a workplace, a formal workplace, on a short-term basis. And this has a lot of advantages, because you may bring a lot of technical skills to the table, but at the end of the day, the company requires you to work in a very specific manner. You have to collaborate with teams of people. You have to have good communication skills. You have to have a good way of project management, talk to multiple stakeholders. And these things don't necessarily happen when you are in university. So most companies would like to see somebody who's had some internship exposure. So this makes it easier for them to train people and get them into the company, because it takes around 3 to 4 months after you join a company to actually get into some meaningful work. The first 3 to 6 months is just spent in upskilling you and helping you understand what companies actually are. So the company doesn't get anything out of you for the first maybe 6 months. They're investing in you. So it's a leap of faith for them. They're hoping that you will deliver in the future. So if you want to make the job easier for the company, if you can do long-term internships, if you can do co-ops, some colleges do allow for co-ops. So if you can do some of these things, then clearly you know more about how companies work, and you make it easier for the company recruiting you to join them. Next point I would also highly recommend is professional development, which means that not just about gaining skills, but sometimes you may have to do additional degrees. So this world of today is such that there are two things happening. One is that just having an undergrad degree is not enough in most cases. Everybody is doing a master's degree, an MS degree, an MBA degree, and so on. It's even happening in the US, where a lot of people who typically only did undergraduate degrees are all moving towards master's degrees and PhD degrees, because that's what gives you the advantage in the labor market. That's what helps you stand out from competition. So it's very important to upskill yourself, but it's not necessary that you do everything right after your undergrad. It's not like you finish your undergrad, immediately do a master's, immediately do a PhD. It doesn't work that way. You have to really ask yourself, is this for me? And when you ask yourself, you've got to ask these questions. What are the pros and cons of each one of the choices I make? If I do an MS degree, what is going to be the advantages and disadvantages? Remember, whatever you do in life, there's always going to be pros and cons. Do a PhD, also there's going to be pros and cons. So ask yourself, should you do an MS? Should you do an MBA? Should you do an MS and MBA? Should you do an MS and PhD? Do you want to do an MS, MBA and stop there? A lot of options out there, and you can only decide this if you understand what your skills are, what your strengths are, and maybe having some work experience can help you. So if you're confused, I highly recommend that you work for a couple of years and get a sense of what is it that the companies want? What do you bring to the table? And once you know what you bring to the table, then maybe you can understand, maybe I'm not a technical expert. Maybe I'm a business expert, right? So once you realize more of how businesses work, you can make these fundamental decisions. So I highly recommend that you go for degrees. The second reason for doing additional degrees is that everybody is actually living much longer. The world of today has pension, has social security, if you're based in the US, all designed maybe 70, 80 years ago. So the social security system was designed in the 1940s and 1950s in the US. It's almost 70 years since then. Nothing has changed from a governmental perspective in terms of how they look at the workplace. But unfortunately, the workplace has moved on. So what's happening with the workplace is that everybody is living much longer and the limited funds for the government. In India, for example, in your late 50s, you're expected to retire. Earlier, people would probably live maybe 50 years back. People would live till their mid 70s or early 70s, and that was it. But people now are living much longer. They're living to their 90s. There are some reports that most kids born today are going to live to their hundreds. And the average life expectancy is going up dramatically, which means that you also have to ask yourself, how will I survive my retirement years? And what that means is the skills you gain today are not going to be relevant 30 years later or 40 years later. So you have to look at lifelong learning. Maybe you do your undergrad degree, work for a couple of years, do a master's degree, work for 10, 15 years, then do one more master's degree because the workplace is going to change rapidly. And you want to make sure that you learn the skills of that time, because even doing a PhD now doesn't mean that the PhD will be relevant even 30 years later, right? You have to continuously read and upskill yourself. So that's the nature of professional development. Other point I would add, point number 6, is that understand the role of networking. So expand your network, talk to people, expand your social circle, not just on LinkedIn, but also be connecting with people. So when you are working, try to have conversations by connecting on LinkedIn with people and asking them, hey, can we have a chat? Can we have a coffee chat? So if you're in Bangalore, it's very easy to connect with people and say, hey, can we catch up for coffee? Develop a relationship with people. It's not always that you need to find a job or internship as a result of that interaction, but it's also about trying to understand what are the perspectives of different people, which companies are they from, what are the pros and cons of working in that specific company, what are the pros and cons of working in that specific industry. And what you read on the internet is not a good sign of what the truth is. Sometimes having these face-to-face conversations makes you aware of what reality actually is. So I highly recommend that you expand your network, especially in the circle you are in. For example, if you're in a city, it's very easy to expand your network. If you're not in a big city, you can still reach out on LinkedIn, have phone conversations. And the more conversations you have, the more people you will know, and the more likely that they're going to give you referrals in the future. So without knowing someone in depth, you should not be asking for referrals. Okay, let's move on to the next point. The other thing I also want to touch upon is sometimes students settle for too much comfort in their lives very early. When I say comfort, it's about that, for example, if you're getting paid really well, you join a company like Google, you're getting paid really well, you begin to coast. You begin to think that, hey, everything is going well. I'm getting paid a lot of money. Why should I learn anything new? I'll just do whatever I have to do the bare minimum, do a 9 to 5 job and do nothing more. Not work on the weekends, not work extra time. And that's bad because everybody else is furiously learning skills. The people you underestimate right now is thinking that there are nobody out there, are all learning. They're all learning computer science skills. They're all learning business analytics skills. They're reading data analytical skills. Everybody's improving. Everybody's doing master's degrees, PhD degrees. So the people you look down right now, their career is going to go up over time. And if you're here and if you're just stagnant, you're going to be much below them after a long time, maybe after 5 years, 10 years. You're going to feel a substantial gap narrowing and then increasing, that they're getting better than you. And their compensation is probably at that time even much better than you. So all these things can happen if you are too comfortable with where you are. So try to shake yourself a little bit whenever you're in a company. Go out and interview with other companies. Check out what other companies are asking. What do they expect? Do you have the skills they are looking for? And I think that's a good way to get feedback. Always try to keep learning. Every couple of months, ask yourself, am I learning something new? If not, maybe you should definitely consider quitting the company you're in, because in your 20s until your mid 30s is your fastest learning curve. You really, people do not learn much in their 40s and 50s. They're pretty stagnant. Learning has to happen in the early stages of your career. Focus on that. So point number 8 is failure to adapt to change. So sometimes you don't see change happening. Suppose your company is not doing well, your industry is not doing well. You just stick to that company because you're too comfortable, and you're not seeing the changing trends. So it's not just about doing your work, but also looking out for what's happening in the economy, what's happening to your company, what's happening to leadership, what is the culture. All these things also give you a good sense of what's happening. And then it makes it easier for you to decide if that company, that sector is for you or not for you. You can change sectors by doing an MBA. You can do multiple short-term courses, pick up different skills, go to different sectors. Be open to it. Do not close your doors. Point number 9 is to develop soft skills. I think this is probably extremely important. Most people think that technical skills will help you throughout your career. That's only partly true. As you go forward in your career, it's all about communication, it's all about leadership. Even as a software engineer, after being a manager, after you become an engineering manager, many people go on to become directors, senior directors, they become CTOs, they become chief product officers, they become again CEOs at the end. And in all these positions, anything at the level of director and above, there's very little technical work you're doing. You're doing actually a lot of project management work. You're doing a lot of communication with different stakeholders. You are trying to create maps about how to get work done, how to get people involved, how to create stakeholder engagement. You're creating plans, financial plans. So there's little technical work. You're focusing a lot on other pieces of work which is outside your technical domain. So understand that the two most important facets of being a leader is, can you communicate well and can you lead teams? Not everyone is good in it. In fact, I would say only maybe 5 to 10% of most people are good in both these qualities. So focus on this, because later on in your career, it's very difficult to pick up on communication skills. Focus on this very early. Try to join Toastmasters. Try to be in scenarios where you're organizing events, working with multiple stakeholders. You are in front of people. You're the voice of some organization. You're volunteering for an organization and doing something, talking to students. Just be out there. Maybe have a YouTube channel, practice talking, because the more you communicate, the better your soft skills are going to be. And that's extremely important for senior level roles. And most people are not able to get to senior level roles because they don't have these skills. Indians especially are susceptible compared to Americans, because most Americans naturally have soft skills, even though their technical skills are weak. But for Indians, their technical skills are strong, and they assume that the technical skills will help them throughout their career. And that's not going to be the case. You do need leadership and soft skills, maybe after 5-10 years of your career. One way to improve yourself is to collect feedback from people. So if you're in a workplace, ask for feedback every now and then. Ask your manager, ask your friends. Get 360-degree feedback from people below you, people right next to you, people above you. Collect feedback. Ask yourself, what action can you do to improve yourself? If there's a consistent theme coming from different people, that means there's a problem with you. So take it seriously and act on that feedback, right? So the more you self-reflect, the more you act on feedback, the better person you're going to be. So even CEOs have a leadership coach accompanying them on all meetings. So the coach tells the leader, hey, these are the things you have to work on. This is not the way to talk to some of the stakeholders. You made mistakes. So a lot of people learn by looking back at how they performed. And I think students, especially in your 20s, have to be really aware of collecting feedback. Feedback is uncomfortable, but the more you collect it, the more you act on it, the easier it becomes. Last point I would want to leave you with is, many folks don't prioritize work-life balance. They work too hard very early in your careers. This is a difficult topic because companies do expect you to work very hard, but then keep a space for yourself. Make sure that you're learning something new every day, not just in the workplace, but also reading books, traveling, having a healthy social life, because these things are very important in terms of building your career, and also having a safe personal zone for yourself where you can also involve in personal activities and gain fun in your career. So don't burn yourself out very early in your career, because your life will only get more and more complicated every year. So if you start off being extremely complicated, it's going to become 100 times more complicated within 10 years. So I would say that Be comfortable about managing work and also managing your personal life. Have a clear, try to draw a line, try to keep a healthy balance. It may not always work out every single day, but keep that in mind. You can make it work, maybe not every day, but over a week you can make it work. So carve out space for yourself, work out, do not forget exercise, and these things are always going to pay you long term, taking care of your health and so on. So there's a lot to take care of outside your workspace. Okay, so hopefully you found this useful. Let me know in the comments below what you thought. Until next time, folks, bye bye.